Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of RE010, where I take old stories that I did way back in the day and bring them up to a modern standard. Anyways, this story is called Thicker Than Water, and it is written by RegalLegalEagle. Devaya Cosman Rain Nevershell, Princess of the Ascendant Throne, Grand Duchess of the Crescent Nebula, Wielder of the Sacred Stone, Keeper of the Nevershell Hierarchy Tome, first of her name, looked at the small ID card in her hand. It simply said Devaya Cosman N.D. Cosman was a plenty common name, despite her bloodline tracing back to the original lineage. She rubbed her fingers over the M.D. with a smile. It was the only title she had to work for. The rest had been given through sheer luck of being born into the right family, or perhaps the wrong one, depending on your outlooks. She was eighth in line to the throne, close enough to be exceptionally valuable politically, but far enough that she didn't have the power or position people thought she did. Besides, her eldest brother had already secured his position as the next in line with a few choice assassinations. He could keep it. She really didn't want the responsibility or the stress. She looked out through the porthole down at the planet that was going to be her new home and smiled a bit wider. She had to sell all of her jewelry that she could get her hands on, appoint a few shady individuals where she could, and call in every favor she had. But she was finally out. Not legally, of course, but it should be at least a week before her family discovered she'd run off. No more banquets, ceremonies, or suitors for her. Miss, we'll be landing soon. She looked up and smiled at the ugly creature that spoke to her. Thank you. She quickly secured a small satchel that held most of her valuable belongings now. They'd bring out a duffel bag of simple clothes once they landed. She took a time to evaluate the ugly crewman. This species was fresh to the galactic scene. Their technology was downright barbaric. Their culture was 1,000 years behind that of her people, and their propensity for violence and injury was quite pronounced. There were all reasons that she'd chosen to live among them. Hopefully, they had no idea who she was, and with how often they should need a doctor, her position in this little colony should be secure. It would give her a chance to live among strange new creatures, experience life like a commoner, and she'd be able to practice medicine, which her royal life never would have allowed. There were some aspects she wasn't particularly fond of, however. They seemed to eat a lot of meat, and their bodies apparently couldn't efficiently break down all they ate, so they had an awful habit of releasing semi-toxic gases. Not to mention, they had bony protrusions that grew out of their digits. She'd been told that if they didn't trim them down regularly, they'd get very sharp and full of dirt. Their faces were also rather ugly to her. They'd sort of looked like someone smacked them in the face with a stick when they were young. It was too scrunched up. The ship began to rumble, and she saw a flare of heat around the viewport as the ship breached the atmosphere. She couldn't believe they relied on heat shields and thermal plating. Hopefully, they'll develop more sophisticated vessels soon. But the captain did a fine job, and they had soon landed with only a gentle bounce onto the landing pad. She unfastened her seat, and the creature showed back up to help her. She was the only passenger on the supply run. Well, Miss Cosman, welcome to the human colony of Contreras, he said, and she nodded in return. Thank you. She walked down the ramp onto the planet itself and looked around. Her long ears twitched and turning as she took in the sights and sounds. They were on the edge of a very basic little colony. All prefabs so far, no new construction. There weren't any streets, and she spotted just a few lights on outside of some of the structures. When nightfall came, it would be dark indeed. There were a few small groups of trees on the edges of the town, but this part of the planet was dominated by wide fields. They were setting up for ranching and farming until the colony got better established. It should be quiet and boring, and she was looking forward to it. Nam your bag. She turned, and one of the humans was holding out her duffel bag from the cargo hold. She blinked and looked at him, unsure what he wanted, and then realization hit her. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, of course, sorry. She took the strap and laughed a little, realizing that it was silly to think that they'd do such a thing for her. Shouldering the strap of her duffel bag, she had to lean a bit to try and keep it positioned correctly. Now that she had a bag and her satchel on her person, she was literally carrying all of her possessions. A long cry from living in the luxurious prison. The humans were busy unloading the cargo from the ship, and no one seemed to be approaching her, so she began to walk into town. As she approached one of the first buildings, she gasped in surprise as two humans suddenly tumbled out of the door, wrapped up in a struggle of some kind. They were kicking and punching, biting and scratching. She looked around, noticing the humans were just walking by, but she couldn't believe that this was normal. Hello? Where are the law enforcement? She asked one of the humans walking by, who gave her a strange look and then kept going. Law enforcement, she cried out, trying to find someone to stop the fight. However, after she had yelled that out, the two of them stopped and looked up at her. Yeah, what do you want? She paused, wide-eyed and open-mouthed, as she realized the two figures were wearing the armored uniforms of human law enforcement. You're this town's law enforcement? Yuck, lady, out here we're the deputies. If you want the sheriff, she's in her office. Yeah, what do you want anyway? You two are having an altercation. Isn't that against the law? The two looked at one another and began to laugh as they untangled their limbs and got up. Crap, lady. It's just brotherly love. I'm Hick and this is Yokel. Howdy. You're brothers. Why were you fighting? They shrugged. I think one of us said something stupid. Probably. And the sheriff allows you two to behave like this? Devaya couldn't believe these two would be protecting her from vagabonds and rapscallions. Well, Mom sure don't like it, but what we kind of do it anyway. Your mother is the sheriff? They nodded. Devaya didn't know what to make of it. Perhaps humans were a little too crazy, but she couldn't change her plans now. This was her chance at freedom, so she shrugged. Well, if you're not in conflict anymore, could you point me to the clinic? Oh, you're the new Sawbones. Doc said that he was getting a new one of you. Good thing, too. He gets mighty busy sometimes. Right this way. They turned and began to lead her down the street, as if they hadn't been fighting and were indeed best friends, or brothers, as it turned out. Oh, what's a Sawbones? I surgeon. Sometimes we run out of the right meds and such, so they just cut injured limbs off and stitch up the wound. She made a face at the idea. That hadn't really been covered in the med school. She knew how to perform an amputation, of course, but they made it sound downright common. So, the colony is equipped with cybernetics lab for prosthetics? No. If you mean them robot arms and legs and stuff, then, no. Oh, we put in a request, and in a few months, the supply will bring a couple. Until then, it's all good old-fashioned wood. The horrified look on her face was missed as they led her down the street. They finally stopped in front of one of the prefab buildings at the center. Here you are. She noted the red crosses humans used to denote health, but wondered why they didn't have a holo projector above the entrance to mark the location. Perhaps in a town this small, everyone knew where it was. She looked between the two and gave a little curtsy, even though she was wearing pants. I appreciate the escort, Hick and Yokel. Are you calling us names, lady? They suddenly leaned forward as if she'd insulted them. What? Wait, no, I mean, but isn't, I'm sure. She floundered as she tried to think if she had used the wrong human words before they laughed. Yokel slapped her on the shoulder and she staggered to the side, barely containing the gasp of pain. We're just fecking with you. See you around, I'm sure. They moved on then and waved, and she supposed that was a friendly human greeting, but she rubbed her shoulder and winced. She couldn't remember the last time someone struck her, and they had behaved like it was totally normal. A little nervous about her new friends and neighbors, she opened the door to the clinic and stepped inside. There was a small waiting room and a reception desk with no one behind it. Hello? She asked the empty room. Then there was a flash and a blue image of a female human appeared behind the counter. Greetings, I am Diane. Welcome to the New Georgia Clinic. I think we're in Korea, miss. I am a highly sophisticated AI. I think I know what planet we're on. All right. I'm Devaya Kosman. I'm the new surgeon and general physician. Miss, I don't appreciate practical jokes. Talking rabbits cannot be doctors. What? She blinked in confusion. Her tail twitched a bit in anxiety. What was a rabbit? Was that some sort of slur? This was the most confusing AI that she'd ever dealt with. The hell is the racket? She heard a gruff voice growl out before one of the doors leading further into the clinic opened up to reveal an elderly-looking human with graying hair and a thick moustache. Shut the hell up, Diane. I do not recognize this command. Shut down, you electronic bimbo. The blue figure vanished, and Devaya was left clutching her satchel nervously as she looked at the human. He looked over at her and immediately relaxed. Sorry about that. You must be the Lorian doctor I was expecting. Hypocrite's career. She winced as he butchered the greeting, but then smiled. Thank you. Yes, I'm Devaya Kosman. You're the town doctor. I wasn't given a name. Dr. Ramon, your English is very good. Lorian are rather adept at learning languages. Always good to know. I'm handy in English and Spanish with a little bit of Xeno tongues. That's nice. She nodded, but held back her surprise that he only knew 2 languages fluently. It did explain why he butchered the greeting. What about you? 592 fluent languages. The old man arched his bushy brows at that and slowly nodded. Well, good to have an interpreter around. Here, let me show you to your room. He turned, waving her back through the door he'd stepped out of. The halls were bare and pure white. She knew humans like to keep hospitals and clinics sterile colors for some reason. Soon, he stepped into a small room that was roughly the size of one of her showers. Well, they weren't her showers anymore, were they? There was a bed, some shelves, a desk, a dresser, and a bathroom that was tiny compared to what she was used to. It's a bit small, I'm afraid. It's perfect, she said with a smile and hefted a bag up onto the bed. This is all I have anyway. I don't need much space. Well, that's the spirit then, youngster. I'm afraid that I'm not entirely up in Lorian culture and all that. Your credentials look great, but I couldn't tell the classwork apart from the residency. How long have you been a doctor? Oh, I'm only 45, and this is my first posting. He arched his brows, and she could tell that he was confused. We generally don't leave home until we're 50. I'm actually one of the youngest to graduate the academy, but I assure you I've performed hundreds of operations at this point. Well, that's some relief then. I was worried that you hadn't cut someone open before. I haven't actually cut an organism open. They were virtual reality, but I assure you that we have the finest medical education in the galaxy. I don't think that's an issue. The human shrugged. Well, the auto-doc is on his last legs. These days, I don't trust it for more than amputation, so having any surgeon is better than having none. I'm glad to have some help here. I don't even have a nurse. You don't? Well, the last one was some rich prairie girl from the core planets who wanted to play at being a frontier doctor. She couldn't hack it. 1 week before, she was crying for home. Devaya's face went neutral at the news. But you're in your 40s. I'm sure you've been out in the frontier before. No. No? This is my first time away from home. Oh! He looked a bit surprised. Well, I'm sure you'll be fine. Here, let me show you around the place. Oh, Dr. Ramon? Just call me Doc. Doc, what's a rabbit? What? The AI. Called me a rabbit. Don't mind Diane. She's a glitchy second-hand hunk of junk. I don't think she has Lorians in her database yet. Rabbits are from Earth. They have long ears and fur and short tails like you, so there is some resemblance. Oh, are they nice animals? They're best known for friendly attitudes, soft, cuddly, nice critters. Devaya wondered why he looked a bit nervous for a moment. Well, that doesn't sound bad. There are worse things to be associated with. Yeah. Anyway, like I said, let me show you around. Devaya groaned as she lay back on her bed. It had been a month since she'd landed, and she didn't think the humans would take to her at all. They kept asking her, "What's up, Doc?" and then giggling about it for some reason. Did it have something to do with Doc Ramon? They were always pushing and shoving her when she came out after a surgery to inform the family. They said the physical displays were meant as affectionate, but they kind of hurt. She'd expected life out here to be different than the pampered lifestyle that she was used to, but not quite like this. She couldn't even take a shower every day because they needed to ration water. It seemed like she was always smelly, and her fur was starting to get dry and a bit rough. She also couldn't believe how many injuries they sustained. It wasn't like they were in a war zone. Besides falling and accidents, they also inflicted a number of injuries on purpose. At least once a day, it seemed that she had to set someone with a cast. And so far, 6 people had been shot. 6. Lorians were omnivores, but there was a heavy emphasis on vegetables and greens. Since she'd gotten here, they had only been 2 days where she'd gotten away without eating some form of meat. They put it in everything. It was starting to give her stomach issues, which she was self-medicating for with some of the medicine in the clinic, but that wasn't a very good solution. She was simply astonished the species had survived this long. One of the females had come in a week ago to give birth, and the infant had gotten tangled in the umbilical cord. It was like it was trying to strangle itself rather than be born. That whole affair had been a 16-hour nightmare. Without a nurse, it was just her and Doc having to take shifts with the help of some of the woman's family around to assist. For the first time in her life, she'd needed to use a stim just to stay awake and alert through the entire procedure. She couldn't even operate because they had to save the various painkillers and drugs for more serious problems, Doc had told her. Maybe this had all been a mistake. She'd seen the news that her family was looking for her and had posted some outrageous reward. What she hadn't expected was the news that various other families were posting larger rewards for her capture. This is all a giant mess that she'd gotten herself into. So much for a second chance. Maybe she'd try to sneak out with the next supply shuttle. She doubted that she'd be missed. None of the humans ever called her by her name or offered her to come to dinner like they did for Doc Ramon. She heard whispers here and there when they didn't think that she could hear. They thought that it was strange for a Xeno to be here. Maybe they just needed a human doctor. The door to her room burst open and Hick rushed in. "Doc, come on, you gotta hide. Someone's looking for you." What? But the human had grabbed her arm and pulled her up. She could barely keep up as she rushed through the halls and into the operating room. Then he cursed as the door to the back of the clinic started to open. He quickly opened one of the storage cabinets and shoved her inside, closing the door heavily as she squeaked at being shut in such a small area. She was about to crawl out and demand answers when she heard a guttural verse being spoken. "Get them over here. There are only 3 human law enforcers in this colony. The civilians don't matter." She heard footsteps and various people struggling. "You're fucking dead meat if you think that you can come into my town and push us around like this." That was the sheriff, Meredith. She sounded pissed. "Don't translate that, Henry." That was Doc Ramon. Henry was the town mayor. Devine had only met him a few times. Tall, thin, dark-skinned, nice, but always nervous. "I won't, Doc, but what the hell are we going to do?" "Hey, stop all that gibberish," she heard in Versesh. He wants us to shut up," Henry translated. It wasn't any more talking for a minute as she stayed curled up in hiding. She tried to think about what to do while she hid, but was coming up with a blank. She was a doctor, not a fighter. What was she supposed to do? Something told her that this wasn't a team sent by her family. Finally, she heard a robotic voice, likely the universal translator device. "We want the fugitive." "Who?" That was Henry. "The Loreline. There are no fugitives here, fella, just hard-working colonists." Henry again. "Don't play stupid. We know she's here. Hand her over and you won't need to suffer." "You're the one playing stupid. You killed 3 of us already and think we won't need to suffer." That was Dr. Ramon. Devire had to hold in a gasp at that thought that 3 colonists had already been killed because of her. "Either way, you don't till we start torture." "If you think we'll talk, you're wrong. I know your type. Even if there was a Loreline here, which there isn't, if we gave up, which we won't, you'd still kill us afterwards." He was speaking awfully loud, as if wanting to make sure that everyone heard. "Good point." She heard the blast of fire and a heavy thud of something dropping to the ground. "Who, Doctor? We won't make sure next one slower to die." That was the doctor." Henry sounded faint, as if he could barely utter the words. She heard more Versesh then. Crap. That was the doctor. What do we do now? I don't know how much pain they can take." "Feck it, and just threaten to find and kill their young." Did they forget Henry could speak Versesh? Without being able to see the outside, she wasn't sure what was really going on. She was conflicted about what to do. She couldn't believe Doc had died trying to keep her hidden. She wanted to give herself up and save the others, but they said that they'd kill them anyway. This was all her fault. "You have children? Talk or die." I'm an orphan." That was Yokel's voice. "You, family?" Also an orphan. If you gotta kill someone, just kill me." That was Hick. Why are they all willing to die for her? It didn't make sense.
Someone talk, or all colony burn.
Look, I don't know if she's a fugitive, but there is a Xeno girl here in the colony. That was Henry. She sighed as she figured that he'd tried to give her up and save his people. She didn't blame him. Where is? She is out in the ranch way out of town. Bought some big property, lots of money, keeps to herself. Take us. Devaya frowned, wondering who he was talking about. All right, let's all get loaded into a transport then.
No, just you. Leave law enforcers here. You lie, they die.
Fine, fine. She heard footsteps, and after a while the sheriff spoke up. Hey, Hick, don't you think it's good that there is only one ugly fecker here that's got his back to a bunch of storage cabinets? Yeah, Ma, I think that's a good thing too. Shut up, she heard someone bark in Versace. Slowly, she opened the door to let some light in. She could see Doc's body on the floor of the operating room. There was a big yellow Verk brute just in front of her door facing Meredith, Hick, and Yokel. With the light, she could look around her space and saw more of what was around her. Moving quietly, she opened the door wider, reaching up to the drawer above her. Slowly, she pulled it open as she reached up, feeling around until she felt one of the boxes she wanted. Making sure the Verk wasn't aware of her movement, she pulled the box out of the drawer, opening up a fresh syringe filled with muscle relaxant. Then, as slowly and carefully as she could, she opened the door and crawled out. The Verk was thankfully focused on the three humans. Gulping, she prepared herself and then jumped up, jamming the needle into the Verk's neck, slamming down on the plunger. The creature let out a gurgle and then toppled forward, hitting the ground heavily with Devaya clinging to his back. As soon as he was down, the humans moved. Hick kicked away his blaster while Yokel pulled out a knife and made sure the Verk wasn't getting back up. Devaya had to look away as he did that. She moved over to Doc's body. He'd been shot dead in the chest. She could tell the humans were moving and doing stuff, but she weakly hugged Doc's body and began to cry. I'm sorry, she gasped out. Sweetie, what are you sorry for? Meredith asked. What do you mean? This is my fault. They were here for me, and you said three others died. I'm so sorry. No, sweetie. This was their fault. You didn't pull the trigger. You aren't responsible for what bad people do. As she hugged Doc, she felt the sheriff pet her head and her long ears. If this is the way they hunt criminals, then no wonder you broke their laws. What? Devaya looked up, vision blurry with tears. They said that you were a fugitive. I'm the royal princess. I ran away, so I didn't have to deal with a life that I didn't want. That's why this is my fault. Why didn't you just let them take me? I didn't want anyone to die. I just wanted to be free. Crap, you're not even a criminal. All more reason to help you out. Why are you so calm? Why was Doc willing to die for me? He's only known me for a month. Sweetie, in 1 month you've saved how many people? Not one of the idiots who got shot died. You saved Rose and her newborn. You're dealing with humans, sweetie. When you join our family, we treat you like one of our own, no matter what. Blood is thicker than water. Well, I'm not blood. You're the first Xeno to visit our little colony. Doc sang your praises when he saw your credentials and after your first operation. He said that you could have picked any hospital in the known space. But instead, you came out to help a bunch of dumb colonists and live like this. That makes you blood to us. Devaya just started to cry harder at that. She'd been ready to leave them behind, and now all of this happened. She didn't want anyone to die. The sheriff then stood, speaking into a comm. Everyone in position? She got some sort of reply and spoke up. Fire away. Devaya jerked a bit as she heard gunfire coming from outside. Who's shooting? There were more out there. They thought me and the boys were the only ones with guns since we're the law. Well, they don't know humans. The fire lasted for a few minutes before it finally ended. She got back on her comm. Got him? There was a pause. What about Henry? Another pause. Good. They're all dead, and Henry's just fine. Come on, we got work to do. We need to pull their ship apart and make it look like they were never here. What? Why? Devaya asked. In case anyone comes looking for them. But you mean
You're going to keep hiding me here?
Of course. I just told you your family, and to be honest, we need you now more than ever. Since they killed Doc.
You aren't mad I brought this trouble?
Honey, you just have to understand. We looked after our own. It doesn't matter what you look like or where you come from. There's more to blood than being genetically related. I already tried to tell you that.
But I heard people talk about me behind my back, and everyone invited Doc to dinner, but not me. I thought you all hated me.
Oh, darling, we heard you complain about our food. Henry had ordered up some special veggies to get sent out with the next supply so that we could throw you a proper welcome dinner. We didn't want you to feel obliged to eat what you didn't like. And most people haven't seen a Xeno before, so they were just curious about meeting you. Idle talk. Your family, Devaya. So get a trauma kit and find out if someone out there is hurt. Doc wouldn't want you wasting time crying about him. He'd want you helping people. Devaya sniffed back her tears and nodded. The sheriff was right. She moved then, letting go of Doc's body, as Hick, Yokel, and their mom headed out of the clinic. As she grabbed the only trauma kit they had, she realized now that this wasn't her second chance anymore. It was her third chance. If the humans were this ready to make her one of their own, then she'd never abandon them. With all of their studies, that she'd figured the humans were nothing more than simple, violent barbarians. Clearly, that was a narrow-minded assessment. She never heard of a species that was willing to take in another like this with open arms, and apparently willing to die for them. What was the phrase that she'd used? Blood was thicker than water. If they claimed that she was blood, then who was she to disagree? She had a new family now, one willing to die for her protection and kill for her freedom. If it took her 100 years, she vowed to repay her new family for the trouble that she'd brought them. She'd been born into power, wealth, and nobility, but she'd given it all up to find a real home. And clearly, she had. End of story. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Dragon Soup, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Red Panda 121, Leslie 517, Bushmaster 177, Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Sans the Skeleton, Light Jock, Dragzoon WRE, and Lord Azrakal. Thank you very much.